Hey everyone, welcome to the Oasis Podcast. I'm your host, Miss AJ. Thanks for tuning in. An oasis is something that provides refuge, relief, or a pleasant contrast, and that is exactly what you will find tuning into the Oasis Podcast. This is a space where I and special guests will be cultivating intentional and honest conversations about life's journey. Subscribe everywhere you listen to podcasts and watch us on YouTube now.
Hey y'all, hey. Welcome back to another episode of the Oasis Podcast. So, first and foremost, I hope y'all voted. This is being recorded before the election, but it will be released the week of. I just pray that we all casted the human-centered, non-hate-fueled vote. And I'm gonna leave it right there. But anyway, how y'all doing? So today's episode is a little different from what I've been recording. In some ways, it's tied into it, but a little bit different. We'll definitely be back next episode touching on, continuing my birth journey and postpartum journey, etc. However, this week I wanted to talk about grief and how grief shows up in different areas of our lives. And so when this podcast episode is going to be released, it's going to be on the heavenly birthday of my grandma. So happy birthday, Gama. Mama Kukam. I miss you so much. I love you. And typically around this time, I'm a lot more, I want to say emotional. Those are the words that is coming to my head, emotional and sensitive. Yeah. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's something that I am mindful of. And I wanted to, instead of dealing with it and not talking about it, because a lot of us don't like to talk about our grief, don't like to talk about what is heavy in our hearts, I said, you know what, let me bring this to my audience and maybe some of y'all can relate, I thought, though, instead of just talking about grieving the loss of a physical person, which is very heavy for me still, even though it has been quite a number of years, I also wanted to discuss the grief of losing things that aren't people, right? I know that a lot of us lose things, and whether, it's a job, a person, just other things of that nature. And we don't realize that the sadness of it lingers, that we go through the process of grief. And we also don't understand why we feel or how we've been managing our days the way that we have. And so I figured this is also a good episode to talk about that. But specifically, I'm going to tie it in, of course, to, for me, my birthing journey, my fertility journey, having my daughter, and my grandma all ties into all of that. And also just grieving the life that I thought I would have versus, just grieving the life that I thought I would have. Now, I think it's important to talk about the fact that for a lot of women and birthing people, we have ideas of, this is what pregnancy is going to be. This is what, I hope birth is going to look like. This is, what labor is going to be. And this is what my postpartum story is going to be. And this and this. All of that, like I mentioned before, is wonderful in theory. But in actuality, it goes very differently. And we don't talk about how that can really weigh heavy on us, and we grieve when we don't get those things in the way that we thought we were going to get them. And I know a few women who, wanted a vaginal birth per se. And for whatever reasons that came up, they had to have a C-section. And they were, early postpartum and into their postpartum journey, very sad about it, very down about it, depressed about it even, or held maybe a level of anger, and not understanding that you are grieving the fact that that experience of a vaginal birth was taken away from you. And that's normal. That's okay. And that also needs to be given dedicated time to work through. I don't think we think about things in that way, but we need to, because it's important to our healing, and it's important for us being able to move forward into this journey of motherhood or parenthood. So for me, as I mentioned, it's my grandma's birthday, and some of you who've been rocking with me for a while know that I actually started this podcast post her death, and by it I mean her death. Very sad, and I listen, I cried a lot. I probably might cry during this episode. But at the same time, of those of you again who listen to this podcast or who know me, I also say that it also really filled me with a new life, if that made sense. I, at the time when she passed, was not that I was unsuccessful, but I felt like I was floating through life. I was in a darker period of my life where I was dealing with things that were not for me, definitely below me, honestly. Dealing with things, dealing with people, dealing with situations, and I felt stuck in a way. And she was honestly my light during those times. I would see her every weekend, and of course, as per request. And because, y'all can feel whatever way y'all want, and I'm talking to my family members, I was her favorite. And I know this because she told me. And but she didn't really know how much she really impacted me, how much she was a light for me. During that, it was a dark time. I was in emotionally, mentally in a dark place, and I really didn't know how to pull myself out of this personally created hell. Because yes, there were things happening that were outside of my body, outside of my reach per se, but I also had a lot more control than I knew that I did. And just dealing with some things for quite some years, and just feeling just the feeling that I had at that time, around that time, was just so But I just remember every time I would go see my grandma, and we would just talk, and I would just be with her, just remembering just how loved she made me feel, how seen she made me feel. And I miss her so much. And when she passed away, which was not necessarily suddenly, she was sick, and it took a little while, but I didn't grieve. I don't know how to explain it. She was sick. We knew she was going to die. So I knew this. And I also knew she was going to pass away before she actually passed away. I dreamt it. Again, I think I might have mentioned this in another episode. I'm not going to get into this episode, but I knew ahead of time. So I really maximized and really, really utilized the time that she was here with. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the demands of life? Motherhood? At AJO Consulting Services, LLC, we offer comprehensive wellness services that include personalized coaching, doula care, consulting, and personal and professional development to help you navigate this beautiful yet challenging phase of life. Our services are designed to support individuals and communities, especially women, birthing people, and families of color, in creating a more joyful and stress-free experience. From family planning to postpartum care, we provide the tools and resources you need to thrive. Let AJO Consulting Services help you prioritize your well-being and create a healthier, happier future for yourself and your family. And I really, really made sure I spent as much time with her as possible. It wasn't necessarily like, oh my gosh, she's dead. It's just missing that time we spent, her light, and how she made me feel loved. And knowing that, she wasn't physically there anymore was tough, But when she passed away, it was like I don't even know how to explain it, but I felt like the chains that I put on myself broke. The things that were holding me down, and I felt like I didn't know how to proceed and remove myself from, all of a sudden I gained clarity. And I have said before, and I'll say again, her death brought me life. In life and in death, she continued to bless me, and I'm so grateful for her. I had a long time with my grandma, so I'm allowed to feel how I feel, but I'm not mad. I had a long time with her. I had like 32 years with her, and that's a blessing. It's really a blessing. And so in her death, I gained life, and I was able to just get rid of certain people and remove myself from certain situations and purge myself of certain experiences and feelings, and really propel myself into myself and connecting with myself and connecting with God, and just rebuilding parts of myself that I kind of let fall by the wayside. And I'm so grateful for it. So grateful for it. I continue to honor her, and I will always continue to honor her. She is someone who continues to watch over me and bless me. And my daughter's middle name is actually her name, and that makes me feel so good knowing that. And those who knew my grandma and those who know my daughter, you can't tell me that little girl ain't her kin, okay? The light and joy that she brings, and just knowing and seeing those similarities in her personality before, like, I named her that before I even met her, but I knew she was a gift from my grandma. I just knew she was. I know she is. And maybe one day I'll also talk about that, but that's also one of the biggest. Let me rephrase that. Not everyone believes the things that I believe. I deeply believe in spirit. I deeply believe in souls. I deeply believe in the ancestral realm. And so there is a belief that I have that our souls, our children's souls were, there with God and there with our ancestors prior to us meeting them in the physical. So I believe that, yeah, she was with my grandma. They knew each other. They was kikiing. Grandma chose her, for me after she chose me for her, right? For herself to be her mommy. And that makes me feel good, but it also makes me sad that I couldn't see them together in the physical, because baby, I know my grandma. Oh, she would have been so happy. She would have been so happy to hold her and to meet her and to just enjoy her the way we get to enjoy her. But I'm not going to dwell on the sad parts. I'm going to dwell on the joy and know that she is continuously watching over us and that she's in my daughter. I see her every day in my daughter. Every day. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for it. I really am. And so, other piece of grief that I mentioned a little before, but that I think a lot more of us as birthing people and women and parents grieve, is the life or experience that we didn't get to have. And I can really dive in and get deep with this. I'm not sure if this will be the episode to do so, but I really, for a long time, I held on. My grief showed up as anger. And to be 1000% honest, it was deeper than that. It was rage. It was rage. And I've never felt that level of emotion in that way before. And for such a period of time. And I'm speaking up about it because I want people to know that it's okay to feel these things when you're supposed to, quote unquote, be happy. It's supposed to be a happy time, and it's not. And I recently listened to a podcast, maybe more than one, and it was like a similar message of, you can't heal from things you keep hidden. In this day and age, you never know what people can try to use against you and this and that and the third. But I wholly agree that you can't hold things in and expect them to get gone, right? I feel like that's what the purpose of therapy is for. Unleash, release, unpack, and then so you can let go of things. And on a wider scale, on this platform that I have with the audience I'm trying to meet, with the audience that I have, I want us to heal in community. And so I'm going to share pieces of my own story so that we can do that, so that there's a level of vulnerability seen, so that we feel more comfortable in sharing our own stories. And the reality is, and I mentioned that my pregnancy wasn't the best because there were a lot of physical things about my pregnancy that wasn't great, but there were also a lot of emotional things and things that transpired between myself and my child's father that I did not see coming, and I felt, and still do feel, robbed of my pregnancy experience. And for a long time, I was very angry about it. because I know I might have joked about it previously, but I don't foresee myself having another child. Again, I ain't God. But for me and my own decision making and the role that I play in that decision, I don't foresee it happening. And so that made me so angry that my first and only experience into motherhood was laced with so much bullshit, was laced with empty promises, was laced with not the level of patience, love, and care that I deserved for bring a life into this world that was planned for. And that caused me a lot of rage. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in another episode. But I really was very intentional. I was prayerful. I, in my mind, quote unquote, right, did everything right, or did most of the things right, you know. There's some things that I should and need to be accountable for, and I will be accountable for, that I probably could have went about differently. I held a lot of regret about the decision that I made and with whom I made the decision. But at the time, this is in hindsight, but at the time, it felt like the right decision. It wasn't something done just to be done. I'm a very intentful person. It was done in prayer. You know, like, it wasn't just like, oh, I'm gonna just do this thing. So I know now why it happened the way it did. I understand now what God's plan was for it. But at the time, anger, rage, and I grieved so much what I didn't get to experience, and in a way it overshadowed what I did get to experience. Yeah, and that is at times still tough to deal with and process. I processed it, but sometimes, you know, just because you think you have healed from something, or you are currently healing and you moved to a better space about something, it doesn't mean that you don't get triggered. You do. And in those moments is when, you know, you have to sit with the emotion and then try to work through them. And so I'll have my moments where I'm like, why the fuck did you do this? And that's real. You know, it's real. And in moments like this, I think a lot of people like to be like, oh, I love my kid and that's a given. Anybody who knows me knows I love my daughter, and I do with everything in me. But I don't need a disclaimer to feel how I feel, that two things, like I said, can exist at the same time. I love her immensely. And if I could have done this, if I had the option to do this again, I would not have done it. Because the reality of the situation is that the life that I envisioned, the life that was discussed, the life that was planned for, was not what panned out once things became real. And that made me angry for a long time. And I'm a very logical person when it comes to certain things, and so I try to talk myself out of those feelings, the rage and the anger. Like, all right, well, this is what it is, and and try to, like, business as usual. But no, I had to sit in those feelings because they were mine. They were real. They were part of my experience. And I didn't feel like it was fair. It was not right. I did all the things, you know? And the life that I thought I was working on, planning on, just poof. You know? And again, I might provide some details, and I know y'all minds might be racing of those who don't know the real story, but I might again have an episode on that. But I made decisions to get myself into the situation, and I made decisions to get myself out of it. All of it was to the betterment of myself and my child, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't painful, and it doesn't mean that there wasn't grief attached to it. And there are moments when that grief surfaces, and I have to honor that. That's a part of my story. And I believe, again, it was another podcast episode with, and I hope I don't butcher her name. I think it's Dr. Anita Phillips, that I watched and listened to. And I actually have her book, but I haven't even cracked into it yet. But she was discussing and just guiding individuals, letting people know that don't erase the bad parts of your life. Don't try to bury them. Don't try to make it seem as if they didn't happen. And I needed to hear that when I did, because I think a lot of times that's what we try to do. Hurry up and get to the good part, right? Hurry up and get over this thing, bury it. Don't process those feelings and emotions. We don't want to feel bad, right? We want to feel good. We want to be happy. But if that quote unquote happiness is not real and it's fake, we ain't never gonna feel free. And as a mother, I think a lot of times we bury our own emotions, especially the negative ones, because we're like, oh, I don't want my kid to see me crying, or I don't want my kid to see me sad, and I don't want. But your child needs to see those things, because one, they will experience them themselves. And so you can be a model for them to learn to work those things out, because this is why so many adults are walking around without emotional intelligence, without knowing how to process their feelings and name their feelings and work through those things, because our parents didn't teach us, our parents didn't show us. We literally think our parents are superhuman or robots. And when we become adults and we experience things, not even when we become adults, when we are going through adolescence and teenagers and then adulthood, going through our own ish, we don't think we can talk to our parents because they clearly didn't experience these things, these emotions, because I've never seen them cry and I never seen them do this and that. That's not healthy. That's not realistic. So there's that piece of it. And then there's the next piece of, I want her to know that I'm human. I'm human. I cry, I get sad, I get angry, I get frustrated, and I have to work through them just like she will need to work through them. And so I let my child see these things. But I think because society does such a good job of telling us that we need to hide these emotions and not show our kids this, and we need to be strong, especially Black women, and oh, we need to be strong, that for a period of time, like, I was suppressing these things way too much, and it was to my detriment, which I will talk about in my postpartum journey. It almost took me out. Like, literally almost took me out. And after really sitting down and thinking about that and processing and understanding, I need to be here for my child. I need to be here for this child that I prayed for, that my grandma let me have. I need to be here because I got more life to live. I got more things to accomplish. So I had to let go. I had to let go of that person. I had to let go of that idea of the family I thought I was going to have. I had to let go of the anger and the rage. Because, yes, I didn't deserve any of it, but God has a plan for me. And I don't always have to understand what that plan is, you know? His ways are beyond my understanding. And it took really months and therapy and processing and healing and crying and all that. And just giving myself permission, honestly, was probably the biggest piece of it. To be sad, to be angry, to grieve, was when I finally felt free from these things. And I felt semblances and pieces of the peace that I once knew. And so I'm sharing all this to say that outside looking in, things may appear one way. People might appear strong and they got it together and they're grinding and they're doing things. Or people might disappear. Like I disappeared from the podcast. And it's because so much stuff is going on in the background. I needed to grieve. I needed to get myself back to a self that I recognized. And it's not always pretty. It's not always happy times. There's so many things that needed to get worked through. And quite frankly, I just needed to grieve a lot of my story that I didn't feel I deserved, honestly. That I was like, but I did all the things and I treated people well and I was this and that. And one thing that I kept saying to myself, like, you know, when we go through things and we get upset and we're like, why, God? Like, why did you do this to me? And but I was a good person and I did this and I did that. And what came to me one of those times was, what makes you better? Why not you? And that honestly humbled me. Because what makes you better than the next person? What makes you better than her or them? What makes it you believe that just because, yes, you planned it out and you did this and you did that and you had the conversations and you loved fully and you were vulnerable and that made you less worthy or more worthy than anyone else? And that really helped guide me to the mentality that I currently have of it's all God's plan. The good and the bad of it, the ups. Are you seeking guidance and support in life on your motherhood journey? AJO Consulting Services, LLC offers tailored strategies to help you overcome challenges, build resilience, and achieve your goals. Empower yourself with personalized coaching. And the downs of it is all part of God's plan. And at times when you're in it, it's very hard to see it. But for those of us who are out here grieving actively, who are in the midst of it, we're in the thick of it, I'm here to tell you that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Allow yourself to be in it. That's the only way you're going to get through it. You are still worthy of all the things that you want. You are still loved regardless if that person is no longer there. You are important. You are seen. You are heard. And though the grief is very heavy now, and though the grief pops up at times, though that feeling of loss of the life that you thought was going to be, I truly believe and I want you to trust that better is coming for you. It is. Better is coming for you. Till next episode.
Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Oasis Podcast. I hope you were able to find something that resonated with you on your journey. Don't forget to subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts and YouTube. Rate us and leave us a review and comment on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and YouTube. Share your favorite episode and like us on Instagram and Facebook. If you have any questions, comments, want to be a guest, or any show ideas, contact us at ajaysoasis@gmail.com. That's AAYJAYSOASIS@gmail.com, or direct message us on Instagram and Facebook.